The air crackled with anticipation. Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, a city that hums with the energy of Southeast Asia, a place where ancient traditions meet the relentless march of modernity. But on this day, something more than the usual buzz filled the air. The ASEAN Summit was in full swing, a gathering of nations representing a colossal market of 650 million people, a combined economic powerhouse that could reshape global trade. And all eyes were on one man, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. The whispers started even before Air Canada touched down. Carney's decision to make this his first major international trip as Prime Minister was a calculated gamble. A shot across the bow to those who assumed Canada's foreign policy would forever be tethered to the whims of Washington. For decades, Canada had been the reliable neighbor to the north, its economy inextricably linked to the United States, its diplomatic strategy often playing second fiddle to American interests. But something had shifted. The Trump years had been turbulent, to put it mildly. Tariffs slapped on Canadian goods with the casualness of a tweet, trade negotiations conducted like reality TV, and a general sense that America first meant America alone. While seasoned diplomats winced, a new generation of Canadian leaders saw an opportunity to diversify, to forge new alliances, to prove that Canada was more than just a convenient source of lumber and oil for its southern neighbor. As Carney stepped onto the red carpet, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. Would he be treated as just another polite visitor, a face in the crowd of global dignitaries? Or would ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, see Canada as a serious player, a potential partner in a world increasingly wary of American unpredictability? The answer came swiftly, decisively, and in a manner that sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community. The ASEAN leaders rose, not just a polite acknowledgement, but a full-throated standing ovation. Cameras flashed, capturing a moment that would be replayed endlessly on news networks and analyzed in countless think tanks. This wasn't just diplomatic courtesy. This was a statement. This was ASEAN, representing a $4 trillion GDP, signaling that they saw Canada as a dependable, principled partner, a stark contrast to the transactional, often abrasive approach of the Trump administration. The symbolism was potent. While Carney was being lauded in Kuala Lumpur, Donald Trump was likely tweeting about unfair trade practices or threatening yet another round of tariffs on Canadian imports. The juxtaposition was impossible to ignore. One leader building bridges, the other building walls. One focused on mutual benefit, the other obsessed with zero-sum games. But beyond the optics, beyond the headlines, lay a concrete strategy, a plan so audacious, so ambitious, that it could fundamentally alter Canada's economic landscape.
Plan to double non-US exports within a decade. A staggering $300 billion shift that would loosen America's grip on the Canadian economy and usher in an era of true diversification. This wasn't just about finding new markets. It was about securing Canada's economic future, insulating it from the political storms brewing south of the border. It was about finally stepping out of America's shadow and claiming a place on the world stage, not as a follower, but as a leader. The standing ovation was just the beginning. The real work, the hard work, was about to begin. The question was, could Canada deliver? The devil, as they say, is in the details. And Carney's plan was bursting with them. Forget vague promises of closer ties. This was about cold, hard cash flowing in new directions. The cornerstone? Energy. Canada, sitting on a mountain of natural gas, saw Asia's insatiable hunger for energy as its golden ticket. Liquefied natural gas, or LNG, was the name of the game. The plan was audacious: transform Canada into an LNG superpower, exporting 50 million tons annually by 2030. Ambitious? Absolutely. But with massive infrastructure projects already underway, it was within reach. The beauty of LNG, unlike oil, was its staying power. As developing nations industrialized, they craved a cleaner alternative to coal. LNG, a transition fuel, fit the bill perfectly. And Canada, with its stable democracy and stringent environmental standards, offered Asian nations something the Middle East and Russia couldn't: security and sustainability. But energy was just the beginning. Beneath the surface of the Earth lay another treasure trove: critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earth elements, the building blocks of the 21st century economy. Batteries, electronics, renewable energy systems, all depended on these vital resources, and Canada had them in spades. Carney envisioned a strategic alliance, a partnership that would link Canadian mines with Asian factories, a critical minerals alliance designed to break China's stranglehold on these crucial sectors. Vietnam, Indonesia, nations on the cusp of a manufacturing boom, desperately needed reliable sources of these materials. Canada could be that source, a partner they could trust. The 2025 federal budget reflected this commitment. Defense spending quadrupled over 5 years, with billions earmarked for mining infrastructure, processing plants, and the transportation networks needed to get Canadian minerals to Asian markets efficiently. No more relying on American pipelines or railways. Canada would forge its own path. And then there was the realm of clean technology. Canada, a world leader in clean energy, possessed expertise that Asian economies craved. Hydroelectric power, nuclear energy, wind, and solar. Canada had it all. Small modular nuclear reactors, carbon capture technology, hydrogen production. These were the tools that would allow Asia to industrialize sustainably. Canadian companies in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and advanced manufacturing also saw the writing on the wall. Asia was the future, a land of opportunity, and with government support, they were ready to stake their claim. The timeline was aggressive, 10 years to double non-US exports. But Carney wasn't content to sit back and hope for the best. This was an industrial strategy, plain and simple. Direct government support for market access, trade mission coordination, regulatory alignment. Every tool in the toolbox would be used. Export financing would help Canadian businesses compete in Asian markets, leveling the playing field against subsidized competitors. This wasn't just about free trade. It was about fair trade, a recognition that in a world of economic giants, Canada needed to punch above its weight. The irony, of course, was that Trump's tariffs, intended to bully Canada into submission, had backfired spectacularly. By making trade with the US more expensive and unpredictable, Trump had validated Carney's strategy. He had given Canadian businesses the incentive they needed to look beyond America, to embrace new markets, to forge new alliances. Tariff escalation, Washington's Peterson Institute grimly noted, was diverting investment and supply chains away from the United States. Canadian businesses, weary of the roller coaster ride of American policy, were drawing the same conclusion. Volatility equals risk, and risk equals lost profits. Global Affairs Canada crunched the numbers. Exports to Indo-Pacific economies had already reached a staggering 261 billion Canadian dollars in 2024. The free trade agreement with the European Union, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the burgeoning relationship with ASEAN, each deal chipped away at America's dominance, creating a web of alternatives. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. Trump's America First doctrine was predicated on the assumption that Canada had nowhere else to turn, that tariffs would force compliance, that threats would extract concessions. But Trump miscalculated. He underestimated the allure of Asian markets, their dynamism, their sheer scale. He also failed to grasp the importance of consistency. His policy was a chaotic mess, a whirlwind of pronouncements and reversals. Businesses crave predictability, and Trump offered only uncertainty. The contrast was stark. Carney, meticulously cultivating relationships, building trust, honoring commitments. Trump, lurching from praise to condemnation, tearing up agreements on a whim. Which leader would you trust with your economic future? Asian leaders were voting with their feet. Investment flowed northward, drawn by Canada's stability, its competence, its commitment to mutual benefit. Mining projects, energy infrastructure, technology partnerships. The announcements came thick and fast. Meanwhile, American companies reliant on Canadian inputs faced rising costs and supply chain disruptions. Trump's tariffs, intended to punish Canada, were hurting American businesses. A classic case of shooting oneself in the foot. Trump had set out to teach Canada a lesson about American economic power. Instead, he had taught Canada a lesson about the dangers of dependence. The standing ovation in Kuala Lumpur wasn't just a fleeting moment of diplomatic theater. It was a symbol of something deeper, a fundamental shift in Canada's place in the world. For decades, Canada had been content to play the role of quiet neighbor, deferring to American preferences. Now it was charting its own course, guided by its own interests and values. This wasn't about rejecting America. It was about recognizing that the 21st century demanded a more diversified approach. The United States remained an important partner, but it was no longer the only partner. The $300 billion export diversification target, the deepening ASEAN relationships, the upcoming meeting between Carney and Chinese President Xi Jinping. None of these initiatives required American approval. They were simply a recognition of reality. Canada's prosperity could not be held hostage to the whims of a single trading partner. For ordinary Canadians, the implications were profound. Communities and industries reliant on American markets faced a period of adjustment, but the opportunity was immense. Access to the world's fastest-growing economies, a chance to build a more resilient, more prosperous future. Asian leaders weren't looking north because they disliked America. They were looking north because they respected Canadian reliability, appreciated Carney's professional approach, and recognized that Canada offered something that Trump's America could not: consistency, mutual respect, and a genuine commitment to partnerships that benefited both sides. Would Canada succeed in reducing its dependence on the United States? Geography and integration would always play a role, but the direction was clear. Canada was forging a new path, one that led away from American dominance and toward a more balanced, more secure future.